Hey everyone, I'm Ernie Svensson, and I'll be presenting this session, which is entitled Cloud Services for Lawyers. Now, this is a topic that gets a lot of attention in various parts of the legal profession, and it's been a hot topic for quite a while. Lawyers understandably have a lot of questions about so-called cloud services, and we're going to address those questions, but let's start with the key question that most lawyers have. This is the number one question. Should you be using cloud services? That's the way that the question often gets framed, and then the discussion that follows from that question goes down a path that frankly is really not that useful. So I suggest that while that is a common question, that there are better questions to ask. Because asking should lawyers use the cloud presumes that you can simply opt out of using cloud services. But the reality is you can't totally avoid the cloud. Cloud services are everywhere now, so just like the real clouds in the sky, it's not something that we have that much control over. And asking if you should use the cloud creates false expectations and fosters a deep misunderstanding of what cloud services actually are. So let's go down a path that fosters understanding, and let's ask some better questions, such as what are some precautions that we can take when we're using cloud services, because obviously that's important. What are some ethics issues related to use of cloud services? And which services are the best ones for lawyers to use? So here's what we're going to cover in this presentation. First, what are cloud services? Now, this is something that many of us are confused about, which is understandable, but we don't want to remain confused. So we're going to talk about exactly what cloud services are. And then second, we're going to talk about how cloud services have evolved. And that will help us better understand what cloud services actually are, what they are today, and what they'll look like tomorrow. And third, we're going to talk about security issues with cloud use, because obviously this is really important. And it's really important to understand it properly, because there's a lot of misinformation about security and so forth. And many people out there will demagogue the issue of cloud security. And this is mostly people who make money off of people being afraid, including lawyers. But lawyers need to understand security for every aspect of modern technology. And obviously a big part of that is the cloud. So we're going to talk about where the real threats are and how to avoid or at least minimize them. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the basic types of cloud services. There are many types, but we're going to focus on a few that most lawyers are using or should be using. Okay, so let's dive in and talk about the cloud. First, we're going to talk about what is the cloud. Now, as I said, this is something that's kind of a mushy topic, and it's kind of tricky because sometimes people focus on one thing, and when they focus on that one thing with cloud services, people tend to think that is the sum total of what cloud services are. So it's kind of like, that old thing about the, blind people, the blind men come upon an elephant, and depending on what part of the elephant they grab, they come away with a different impression. If you grab the tail, you think the elephant's a rope. If you, grab the tusks, you think the elephant's a spear, or the ears are a fan, So what part of cloud services you focus on kind of gives you a different impression or leads you down a certain path of thinking about what cloud services are. And really, I think to understand what cloud services are, you have to understand how it's evolved, because cloud services haven't always been the exact same thing. And a lot of this had to do with how technology evolved. So we need to talk about the evolution of the views regarding the cloud and what the cloud is. And that will help us understand better what cloud services are and what they are becoming. So the first place to talk about this is in the very beginning, when the internet was created, we had a way to transmit data, and we could transmit emails and we could transmit pictures. So that was the cloud in the early days. You've got the internet, which is the essential ingredient of the cloud, and it's transmitting information via this medium of the internet that is, the basic part of cloud services. And in the very beginning, when we did this, we used pretty rudimentary tools like these old modems that, dialed the phone, and they looked, pretty goofy, and they didn't go very fast when transmitting data. So those were the pioneer days. Then we upgraded our technology, and we were able to transmit data more quickly using new types of modems. And then the internet backbone itself was being built out and increased. So, the rate of speed at which we could transmit data was a big part of the evolution of cloud services, and continues to be, because every day we're increasing the rate of speed at which we can send data through the internet. So one part of cloud services is the sending of information across the internet. And of course, that's been expanding in terms of speed. Another aspect of this is using the internet as remote file storage and synchronization. So, now we're talking about accessing data on demand or making it available for access wherever we want. And the most simple, understanding of this is websites are sitting out there and you can access data by going to the website. But there's also the idea of you storing your files or someone storing their files and making them available to them wherever they are. And the most popular kind of file storage system right now is Dropbox. Dropbox is a way for people to make their files available to themselves or to other people if they want to via the cloud. And the reason why Dropbox took off and became so popular is because it made it dead simple for people to do this. And so while there were other services ahead of Dropbox that were more robust, that were geared towards organizations and companies, instead of the general public, Dropbox made it dead simple for anyone to do this. And so, of course, this is a driving force with all technology, is when something is dead simple for the average person outside of any kind of organization, when it's inexpensive, dead simple, and widely available, it tends to get adopted really quickly. And that's what happened with Dropbox. And of course, Google has the ability to do this as well. And so Google has a service called Google Drive, which does pretty much the same thing that Dropbox does in pretty much the same way. There are some variations, the user interface being, maybe the biggest one, but the basic idea of making files available to yourself by synchronizing them across multiple devices, including phones and tablets, is one aspect that underlies all this. So because of this ability to store this information this way and access it from anywhere, the cost of storing data has dropped precipitously. So it used to be that people would mostly only store data on their computer hard drives that they had on their local machines, and those prices were dropping. But now that people are accessing and storing data in the cloud, prices are dropping even faster because the economics of shared costs, in the cloud, the scalability of all that and the economics drives those prices down even much faster. So, one thing is the evolution is prices are dropping, and then access to data has become more pervasive because as these services like Dropbox and Google Drive and now Microsoft OneDrive and, there's other services like that, Box is another one. As these services become, as they proliferate, the access ability that we have is more pervasive. So we can access this information we have from anywhere on any kind of computer we have. We can access it from any kind of device we have. Basically, all we need is an internet connection, because that is really the key ingredient. Is there needs to be a live internet connection at the source, whoever is making the data available, whether it's Dropbox, Google, or the websites that you visit. And then you have to have internet access where you are. Well, of course, internet access is pervasive, so it's easy to access your information from anywhere. You can be in a coffee shop, you can be in somebody else's office, you can even be on the beach or in a sailboat or on a plane. So you have access to this data anywhere. You used to store it only on your computer, and you had to put it on a thumb drive or on a disk drive and move it around. But now you can access it simply through the internet. So we're thinking about this idea now in terms of data that we have, but we access it from anywhere, or we move it around very quickly. But now we're getting to a newer thing, which is internet access, but without the local storage at all. So in other words, instead of me having my data on my local drive, but then making it available anywhere or synchronizing it across multiple devices, we also have the ability to do access of data where it's software as a service, or so-called SaaS, SaaS, software as a service. And this is the next phase, the most recent phase in the evolution of using the internet and using the cloud. So we're familiar with software as a service in a lot of different areas. It began really with Westlaw and Lexis when they shifted away from making the data available to you locally on your machine, and you just had access to their software as a service. And actually, that's kind of how it began. I mean, you had to have a dumb terminal. You'd access Westlaw or Lexis. The data was on their site because there was so much data they couldn't, just give it to you. So that was the first iteration of software as a service. And then we had, Microsoft 365 and Google Apps for Business, where they have email that is stored in the cloud, and you don't store it necessarily on your computer unless you want to, but you generally don't have to, and you can trust that Google and Microsoft are going to do a good job of backing up the data and securing it. And so really all you're doing is just using their services remotely, and you're not worried about downloading the data. You can if you want to, but generally speaking, a lot of people wouldn't. And then we get to the situation where in the practice management area, services like Clio, Rocket Matter, and MyCase, and there's a whole bunch of new ones that are coming in, have said, we're just going to be cloud-based to begin with. You're not going to have any of your data on your machine, or it's not going to be the norm. It's going to be, you can download some of it that you need, but generally speaking, we're not going to make it a big data dump because we assume you're going to have a lot of data. It's going to be tricky to organize, and we want to keep things nice and neat and clean and organized. We're just going to handle the organization, and you're just going to log in. So this was only possible when people could trust that they would have good internet service where they were, and the service providers would have good internet service where they were, and that they were going to secure the data at their point. But this idea of software as a service, I mean, it goes outside of the legal profession, outside of data storage. I mean, Netflix is software as a service. They don't give you the download of the movie. They make it available to you through a streaming. And the same is true with mobile banking. You don't download all your mobile banking data. You access it, and you can download some of it and get some reports, but the raw data itself is stored up in the cloud on the bank's website. Same thing with travel services like Expedia and so forth. So we're getting more used to this idea of just accessing data using software as a service. And it's very easy and reliable because we have all kinds of devices now. It's not just, desktop computers. We've got laptops and we've got smartphones and tablets, and we can access this data from anywhere, even from our cars. And, that's what we do when we use GPS services. So all that kind of stuff, this software as a service, is pervasive. It's growing. It's the trend, right? So that's kind of an overview of what cloud services are and how they've evolved. And now let's talk about the next most important thing, which is security. So you have to keep your data secure, and you have to do this whether you use the cloud or not. But a lot of lawyers think that they are the ones that can best protect their data, and so they think, oh well, if I want to be completely sure that I'm securing my data, I'll simply avoid the cloud altogether. And so there's this kind of very protectionist mentality that's not unlike the character in Lord of the Rings, who has this idea that this is my precious data and I'm going to protect it because it's mine and I care so much about it, and because I care more about it than anybody else, I'm going to do a better job of protecting it. And that's not really true, because you have to remember, in order to protect your data, you have to be really good. And how good are you? Well, how good do you need to be? And the answer is, you need to be as good as most hackers who run the most common types of attacks. And in today's world, the sad reality is the hackers are really, really good, and they can get at your data almost from anywhere. And, the number of well-known people who have access to great security and yet were the victims of hacking attacks, we know about this. We know that, Michelle Obama was hacked when President Obama was in office. Shortly after he took office, Hillary Clinton's been hacked, Joe Biden, Kim Kardashian, lots of people, because the hackers are not just pretty good, they're really good. So if your data is available some kind of way, and increasingly because of SaaS services and everything else that you don't have a control over, and just generally the kind of ways that data is easily transmitted and moved around, the hackers have increased access to your data, right? And so they're really good, and they also go after law firms. They go after respectable law firms, big firms that are well-known and have been around. They go after law firms outside of the U.S. if those law firms have data, like we saw in the famous Panama Papers case, where they said, there's this data that this company has, and we're going to go after it, and they got into it. Now, we're not totally sure in all these cases how the hackers got access to data. Sometimes it was through the data being easily available online. Sometimes it was through other means. But the fact is, digital data is easy to copy and move around. And that's the key factor, right? So the thing is, if hackers hack you, it's bad for a lot of reasons. I mean, the first one being that in many cases, they will destroy your data. They'll hold it ransom. They will, the hack will be publicized, and that's bad. But even if it's not widely publicized, if, in the US, there are breach notification laws throughout the US that various states have enacted. And most states have these things called breach notification laws. And if you are the victim of a hacking attack, these laws basically say you have to notify certain agencies and let them know, and then that information becomes public. You have to notify the people who are affected by the hacking attack. This is why when Target got attacked, or when LinkedIn gets attacked, or when any of these big companies get attacked, we find out about it because they have to notify people, and so they do. So one of the things that's come up very recently is something called ransomware. And this is kind of a new twist, because in the beginning, the hackers would steal your data, take it, or destroy it. But now what they do is they make it unavailable to you, and they ransom it. And they say, if you want your data back, or you want us to unlock it and allow you to access, you're going to have to pay us money. So this is going up. It's now like a multi-billion-dollar a year crime, and it's growing. It's growing wildly because it's so easy to do. And the thing is, this is where the idea is like, oh, well, I'm going to keep all my data on my computer and then it'll be safe. It's going to be just as unsafe as it is anywhere else. But the problem is, you or your computer person that you have come in once a week or once a month or whenever, you're not going to be as good at avoiding these attacks as large companies who are managing many people's data, because those companies, it's mission critical that they not get hacked. So their skill level at repelling these attacks or avoiding them is much greater. So yeah, you can have backup tapes and say, I'm going to, do backup of my data and everything else. But the problem is, if somebody attacks your data and encrypts it and then says, well, we're going to require you to pay us a ransom, odds are, if they don't notify you right away, and they might not, or they might have done something to trigger your backup data getting encrypted as well. So all of a sudden, you did what you're supposed to do. You backed up your data, but even your backup data is encrypted as well. So it's really hard to stay on top of all these potential attacks, right? And what you really need to realize is that your local data is probably more vulnerable than the data up in the cloud if it's with a reputable provider. So you need to look for better ways to secure your data. And I would submit to you that is trusting entities like Google or, Clio or whoever is managing lots of data. And I think one illustration of this that will help you understand all of the things that Google, for example, does to secure your data is this video here. So take a quick look, and I think you'll understand that your data is probably better off in the hands of a good, reputable cloud provider.
Google builds and maintains one of the world's foremost networks of data centers. Their design and engineering approaches have created a large and highly scalable data center network. Over the next few minutes, we're going to get an exclusive inside look at how Google works to secure and protect the data that is stored in their data centers. The security and protections that are shown in this video are in place at the time this video was made. Google is always innovating new ways to secure and protect its customers' data. Our tour will focus on 3 main areas. 1. The physical security of the data center. 2. Protection of the data in the data center. And 3. Reliability of operations in the data center. Inside of a Google data center, there are thousands upon thousands of machines carrying out the business of Google and its customers. Whether it's a search on Google.com or an e-commerce transaction through Google Checkout, or working with business data in Google Apps, they're all served through these machines. The machines are custom built by Google to their own specifications. Google builds thousands of servers every year, but all of them are built exclusively to run in these data centers. They're not sold or distributed externally. The machines run a specialized, stripped-down version of the Linux operating system, again to Google's own specification. Only the necessary operating system services and hardware are installed. This helps provide a computing environment that is much less prone to vulnerabilities. And it also reduces the need for Google Apps customers to deploy their own patches. Access to Google data centers is tightly controlled. It's in Google's policy not to allow public tours or site visits, and even Google employee access is restricted. Cars and trucks cannot gain access to the facility grounds until they've been verified and allowed to enter the facility. All vehicle access to the data center is controlled by a restricted barrier. Security fencing around the perimeter helps ensure that all authorized access occurs through this checkpoint. Security personnel are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can monitor vehicle access through this guard station. Google data centers are watched by a comprehensive set of video monitoring cameras, and we can see several of them as we drive into the facility. Once granted access to the facility, authorized personnel must check in at a reception area, such as the one shown here. Access throughout the facility is controlled by badges that use a special lenticular printing mechanism that makes it especially difficult to copy or forge. Access logs are automatically scanned to make sure that anyone who entered an area also left it. Some of Google's data centers utilize biometric devices, such as iris cameras, to verify identity. And security personnel also check a roster of authorized people permitted access. Although we are inside the facility, we're still not yet on the data center floor. This part of the facility is basically a traditional Google office. The business required to run the data center is mostly conducted here. Access to the actual data center floor is restricted by badges and, in some data centers, biometric methods. In this example, an iris camera is being used. One of the most important elements of the machines that Google builds are the hard drives, especially for Google Apps customers, as this is where we store their business data. Google takes great measures to protect its customers' data, and the security and protection of that data is paramount. Google's customer data is stored in multiple locations to help ensure reliability. The files that store the data are given random file names and are not stored in clear text, so they're not humanly readable. For each hard drive that is received in one of our data centers, Google rigorously tracks its location and status. When a hard drive fails or begins to exhibit performance problems, it's brought to this area, where it's reformatted and retested. If the hard drive does not pass these tests, it's removed from the rotation. The data on the hard drive is then overwritten to help ensure that no customer data remains on it. The data override is then verified with a complete disk read. This process helps ensure that there's no trace of customer data remaining on the hard drive. For hard drives that have reached the end of their life, Google has a destruction process that is designed to further ensure that none of the data on that drive can ever be accessed. The drives are destroyed in a multi-step process. One device that is used to destroy old hard drives is known as the crusher and is shown here. A steel piston is pushed through the center of the drive and the platters are deformed, making them unreadable. Another step in the process is the drive shredder, shown here. As you can see, no one will be likely to get any of Google's customers' data from these drives. After the crushing process, the remains are sent to recycling centers. Google maintains an extra backup of the data in the data center that is stored on these tapes, shown here. This provides a level of redundancy to help safeguard its customers' data. Google data centers are protected by robust fire detection and suppression capabilities. This panel shows the current state of fire detection in the data center. Everything is clear now. In the event of a fire or any other disruption, data access for Google's customers is designed to automatically and seamlessly shift to another data center so that they can keep working and their business can continue uninterrupted. The Google data center is constantly monitored by personnel using sophisticated video equipment. This monitoring station allows the security team to view video feeds from many areas in the data center. In addition to the manual monitoring of the video feeds, Google utilizes video analytics that are designed to automatically detect anomalies in the video and alert security staff to investigate further. Some Google data centers are also equipped with sophisticated thermal imaging cameras that can identify potential intruders at the perimeter or within the grounds of the facility using heat signatures. This allows the security staff to effectively monitor the perimeter and grounds during the day and night, as well as in difficult visibility conditions. If the security team spots something out of the ordinary on the video surveillance, they are trained to immediately respond and investigate. Mobility and rapid response in the data center are enabled by the use of carts, jeeps, and scooters. Google maintains relationships with local law enforcement, and should the need arise, they can be called on site. Google data centers are equipped with emergency backup generators that are capable of powering the data center operation in the event of a power failure. Google data centers are connected to the internet via high-speed fiber optic cable. In each data center, there are multiple redundant connections to protect against the possibility of a failure from a single connection. In addition to operating data centers designed for security and data protection, Google data centers are designed for sustainability and energy efficiency. This is central to Google's commitment to being a carbon-neutral company. In 2009, Google announced that its data centers currently met energy efficiency levels that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency projected only the most state-of-the-art data centers would possibly meet by the year 2011. It's been many years since Google built its first data center, and along the way, they've evolved into sophisticated data center designers. As you've seen in this video, Google works to secure and protect its customers' data with numerous safeguards. Some of the ones we've highlighted in this video include physical barriers and perimeter fencing, 24/7 security presence, access control with badging and biometric identification, local law enforcement response, video monitoring and video analytics, data protection, file fragmentation, replication, and storage, hard drive lifecycle management, and fire detection and suppression. Furthermore, Google also employs additional...
All right, so you get the idea. The problem with security is most likely not going to be with the cloud provider if you're going to use somebody trustworthy like Google, and most cloud providers that you would be using, and those are easy to find, are going to be trustworthy. So Google, Dropbox, those kind of services, either out of the box, they're inherently reliable, or you don't have to do that much to make them what you need them to be for you as a lawyer. So the problem isn't them, the problem is you, most likely. And that's because it's so easy to hack somebody who's using a computer or a digital device and who doesn't understand security. So the key is, it's a wild world out there. There's a lot of lions, and, the people who don't know about security are like the gazelles. And what you want to avoid doing is you want to avoid being a gazelle that gets hit by a lion. And, that means a hacker. And the thing about hackers is hackers automate their attacks, right? So they're not just going after one person usually, although they can, but usually those are high profile people and that's not you. And so you need to work on the common attacks that are happening most easily. And those are the automated attacks. And so you need to understand how those work. And basically how an automated attack works is, number one, it has nothing to do with technology. It has to do with psychology, which the hackers call social engineering. So the worst vulnerability is the psychological ploys that they use on people that are based on the way people normally act. And it's kind of like the way magicians trick people. And so here's like the simple trick that the hackers use, which is basically like a magic trick, except it's going to harm you instead of entertain you. So number one, they capture your attention some kind of way. Then they quickly create trust. And then they trigger an action, which is usually you clicking on a link that takes you to a website, which immediately then takes over your computer. So it begins with the attention, and that is usually going to happen with an email that they send somebody. It could be a text message. More often, more recently, that's becoming a thing that people do. But, let's just look at the email. It's some kind of email that comes to you from a hacker. It says, hacker will say in the subject line something like, "I can't believe this picture of you." That's going to get your attention because you're thinking, what is this picture? And then there'll be something that says, "This is ridiculous and you should be ashamed." And then there'll be some kind of link that says something like Facebook and then your name. And maybe it's, something where you look at it and you think, wait, that's me on Facebook? Where did that come from? So right away, you're going to go click on that. But when you click on that, it's going to take you to the hacker's website, and it's going to either take over your computer right away and put things in it, or it might install a program that lets them monitor every keystroke you type on your computer, including passwords. So then they'll get access to your passwords in every account that you've typed a password for while they're watching you. And you say, well, I'm not going to fall for that because I don't trust any email that arrives from anyone. But see, here's how the trust part works, is the email is going to have come from your friend. And you say, well, I can trust my friend, but here's the thing you don't understand, is your friend's computer got hacked first. And then the hacker blasted emails out to all the people in your friend's contact list, and you were one of them. And so that's how it worked, right? So they got you to pay attention. They got you to trust the email because it came from your friend and said something that looked enticing to you, and you took action and clicked on the link. So whenever you're clicking on a link from somebody you shouldn't click on it from, but you're going to trust them because you know them, or you have some perception that you know them or can trust them, it's game over. Okay, so that's one way the hackers get in. Another way that they'll get you is if your password is easily guessed, because to log into various accounts, obviously you have to have a password. And the dirty little secret that all hackers know and that most people don't seem to understand is that there are these passwords that people tend to use because they're easy to remember. In some cases, they're just the default password that comes with some service and they don't change it. And so these are, the hackers know what these passwords are. And every year, news organizations release a list of the 25 most commonly used passwords. And they're all they always tend to be the same, which is disheartening because it means people aren't learning. So in 2012, the most common one was password, but they're all words that appear in the dictionary. They're simple words, and that's another way that hackers can get access is even if they can't guess it, they can run what's called a brute force attack using a dictionary of words, and they just keep guessing every word until it hits, and then they go, okay, bingo, we're in. So if you're using dictionary words, if you're using easily guessed words, that's a problem. So what people recommend and have recommended for a long time was that you use some kind of strong password. So it's a password with numbers and uppercase characters and lowercase characters and symbols, and that was what people said you should use. And it's kind of like, Sergeant Snorkel from Beetle Bailey, the cartoon, if you remember that, he would curse, and the cartoonist would substitute the curse words with these weird symbols. So that was what people were recommending, and they were saying you need to use passwords like that. Now, the problem with that is those passwords are harder to remember and they're harder to type, and so people don't like them, and so they don't use them. But now the security experts have realized that was bad advice, along with the bad advice of you should change your password every 30 days because people won't do it. So you shouldn't use these strong passwords. What you should do instead is use a passphrase, because a passphrase, unlike a single word that's in the dictionary, can't be easily guessed because the hacker would have to guess the combination, and that's incredibly hard. So using 3 unrelated words like happy bird today or wolf nest rock, and you can use uppercase if you need to, and if the service requires you to use a number, you can throw one of those in. But a passphrase is really easy for you to remember, but hard for a hacker to guess or to use a dictionary attack. So this is what you need to use. And the other thing you need to do is you need to use a different password for every important account that you have. So your email accounts are very important because whenever a password reset is sent, it's going to be sent to your email. And so if a hacker has access to your email account, they can go to places and say, I forgot my password, and then have it reset, and they've got access to your email and then get in that way. So your email account is really like Fort Knox. You have to absolutely protect that with everything that you've got. But obviously your online banking and any places that, have important information, you need to have strong passwords for those, but they need to be different for every one of those accounts, because if for some reason, there's a hack and one of those services says, well, we got hacked, and they do their breach notification law and tell you, you're going to have to change your password in every important account, instead of just the one that got, hacked or said that they got hacked. So to make your life easier in today's modern world, you need a different password for every important account. And yes, that does seem like a lot of work. However, there is a tool that you can use to automate this process on your end so that your life is easier and more convenient. And that basically is, you should use a password manager. And there are several of them out there. There's a service called 1Password, which started off as Mac only, and now it works for Macs and Windows computers. And there's one called RoboForms, and more recently there's one called Dashlane. But the one that I recommend, unless you have some strong preference, already in place, is to use LastPass. It's free. The service level for the free version, they have a paid version, but the service level for the free version does everything you need to do. It's super easy to use. It has an app for your phone. It works across all your devices. You can keep it in sync. The key is you have to have one password that you remember that gets you into this service, which, if it's a passphrase, will be easy for you to remember and hard for a hacker to get into. So you have one password that gets you into the service to unlock and have access to your passwords. And then you can either copy and paste them or type them, but it actually has a tool that lets you autofill them if you're using a browser on your device, so that you don't have to type them, because if they're long and hard to type, you don't want to have to do that. So the LastPass password manager is the one I recommend. It makes your life a lot easier, and you don't have to remember all your passwords. You have access to them. Now, the other thing that you're going to want to do, especially for your email account, but I would recommend you do this for every important account, is enable something called two-factor authentication or dual-factor authentication. And basically what that's all about is, dual-factor authentication means that simply having a password is not enough. So in single factor, you enter the password and you're in. The problem is What if the hacker gets access to your password, or what if they're trying to do a brute force attack? Two-factor authentication requires two things. One, the password, and two, a thing that you have. So the way it works is the service, let's say it's Google that you're using for your email, and let's say every 30 days, Google will say, well, this is fine that you're logging in with the password, but we're going to check and see and make sure that you are the you that set up this account. So we know that you have a cell phone. You told us what your cell phone number was. We verified that when you set up the two-factor authentication. So what we're going to do is send you a 6-digit code now, and you're going to enter it. And then with the password, you've entered that already, but you enter the 6-digit code. Now we know it's you because we know you have access to this device, because only you are going to have access to your phone, not a hacker, unless the hacker stole your phone and it was still running. So when you log into a new site from a new computer, it's automatically going to get triggered. So it'll send you this thing that says, here's the deal. You receive the code by text message and so forth. This is what it looks like. It'll say, hey, here's your verification code. You've got to enter the code. You enter the code, and then when you enter the code, you'll get in. It's kind of like that. Boom, done. And now you're into your email. Now, if somebody tries to log in to your email account, or has the password and logs in from a new device, okay, you'll also get a notification saying, hey, we noticed that you logged in from this place. Is that you? So you'll get these warning emails. And so there's a lot of extra security that comes with two-factor authentication, which means that a hacker in Russia, even if they had access to your password some kind of way, wouldn't be able to get into those sites either at all, or if they did somehow get in, you'd get a notification that say, hey, somebody logged in from this place. So you should enable all of these things on your important online accounts like email and anywhere else. So I mentioned earlier, these are basically like lions, and they're going after the zebras or the antelope or whatever. What you're trying to do is avoid being at the back of the pack, right? So if you're not doing anything to maintain security in your online accounts, you're at risk, because the hackers are going to go after the slow-moving, easy prey. And if you just increase the level of security to make it more annoying and more difficult, you will be secure from 95% of the most common types of attacks, and you won't have to worry about it too much. But it is something you're going to have to do, and you have to take action, and it will annoy you periodically, when you have to enter the 6-digit code. But I have a maxim that is, if you're not occasionally being mildly annoyed, then you don't have enough security measures in place. So this is just a fact of modern world, whether you're using cloud services or not, because the bank's still going to have your data available online, whether you set up the account or not. Somebody could set it up. So you need to not avoid the cloud. You just need to learn how to secure your data in the cloud. And you are usually the target, not the service, not them getting hacked into, but you clicking on a link, or somebody in your office clicking on a link in an email or a text message or something like that. All right, now let's finally wrap up with a few observations about cloud services and about technology related to cloud services. So one of the things that people get obsessed with is they say, well, lawyers need to really carefully vet the cloud service providers. And that's true. You do. You can't abdicate all responsibility and use any old service, a service that's like Joe's Crab Shack and cloud service provider might be a fly-by-night service provider, right? But most lawyers don't have a problem with this. This is like, right up our alley. We're very suspicious about a lot of things. We understand the need to do due diligence and to vet things and be suspicious. Lawyers don't have that problem. So most cloud service providers that are well-known and mainstream are appropriate for lawyers. Now, you will hear sometimes people will say, well, you can't use a service like Dropbox because fill in the blank reason. And every time I've ever heard somebody say this, what they're saying is, well, lawyers are afraid of things. I'm going to give them something else to be afraid of. And either they make money off of this because they're a security provider, or they don't know what they're talking about because they have a superficial understanding of how security works or how these services work. And they feel like the safest thing to do is just tell you not to use it, and then they won't be in trouble for telling you that. But the reality is you can use almost any kind of cloud service, even Dropbox. If you're using Dropbox, the free version, that's not going to have as much protection as the one where you pay them $9 a month. Well, then pay them the one for $9 a month. And if the one for $9 a month it doesn't work the way you need it to work, then you need to get the business class service that Dropbox now provides. And if that isn't secure enough for you because you represent Edward Snowden or you might get hacked, well, then you need to encrypt your data using some additional services, right? So there's ways to make your data secure in whatever service you're providing, but the idea that you blanketly can't use one that's reputable like Dropbox because of fill in the blank usually comes as bad advice from somebody who either has an incentive to, get you to trust them more than anybody else and say, well, just pay us and we'll make your life secure. And they can't. No one can guarantee that your life will be perfectly secure. So you have to be realistic. And if you're using recognized services, you're probably okay. One of the things I would recommend that you do, regardless of your level of cloud storage use, is revise your engagement letter today and say to your clients that, from here on out, we may be using cloud services. We will take every precaution. But if you are uncomfortable with us using cloud services, you need to tell us right away before we commence our engagement, because we're not going to be able to represent you if you don't allow us to use cloud services. And no client is going to say no to this because pretty much everyone is using cloud services. I mean, obviously there could be exceptions, like if you're representing some spy agency or something. So, but the goal here isn't to come up with the outlier weird exception. The goal here is to figure out what's mainstream, what's usually going on. And what's usually going on is cloud services by recognized providers are good. You're usually the one that's the problem. And the thing that's going to make your life easiest is get explicit approval from your clients that you can use cloud services. That way, you understand that they've been informed and you can do what you need to do. So to summarize these things in 3 points, basically cloud services are probably going to be more secure than your cloud data. And you need to pay a lot of attention to security, especially passwords. And this is true regardless of how much cloud services you're using, because passwords are a common feature of all use of computers. And then the main thing to be aware of is that cloud technologies, as we talked about in the beginning, we're evolving and continue to evolve along with everything else in the tech world. And you need to pay attention to how those services are evolving, and are those services now something that you could benefit from using because they're cheaper, they're better, they can do more of the kinds of things you need off the shelf, without configuration. That's the view that you need to take with cloud services. Not, should I use them at all? You are going to use them. The question is, how can you use them better? All right, that wraps it up. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time in the next presentation. Now, if you want more information on streamlining your practice so you can earn more easily, and spend more time relaxing away from the office, check out our online course called Law Firm Autopilot. Over 200 solo and small firm lawyers have signed up and used it to transform the way they practice law. Whether you're a new law school graduate or a seasoned lawyer, this course will show you how to leverage technology to create a thriving law practice. And for a limited time, you can get free access to the first few lessons, which means you can get started right away at no cost. Just text the number 33444 and type in the phrase ModFirm, all caps, with no spaces. That's ModFirm, and text it to the number 33444 on your smartphone right now.